Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lecture 5, Behavioral Change for Kinesiology 2030. So this is a little bit of a new lecture. It's one that I just put together after putting some add-ons to Lecture 4 there because I just think the importance of behavioral change should really be a standalone lecture. It's similar to the aspect of why I did sleep as a standalone lecture, because I think we can just get our point across of how important behavioral change is and also what steps we need to take in order to make behavioral change. Now, when we say behavioral change, it's always, it sounds like an easy process. It's just changing your behavior. But in reality, it's very difficult because, as we mentioned in the last lecture, it's a habit that we're trying to change, a habit that has formed the behavior. And in order to do that, essentially, it is changing our subconscious, because behaviors and habits are at that subconscious level. And there's a lot more psychology to it. And, it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of diligence. It takes a lot of preparation, and just completely understanding what needs to be done to change behaviors is something that not just health professionals need to understand, but everybody needs to understand, because there's so many people have so many habits that aren't conducive to health. People have a lot of health habits that are conducive to health. But what we need to figure out is how we discover what are the ones that aren't conducive to health, and how do we change it. And really, it's about forming these new behaviors at a subconscious level that is going to help and inspire health versus decline it. So a good resource, and this is also going to be a bit of a reference point as well, is this James Clear book, which is called Atomic Habits. So essentially, this is a great book on how tiny change can really make a huge difference on behaviors, and it could really compound into massive results. So the book helps a little bit understand human behavior and what makes us do the things we do every day. And it does help pave the way to solve a little bit of the health crisis that's happening right now, because it's all about making the small changes to improve your health overall. And what we want to try to do is really help people. And as health professionals, we want to help them change their behavior in order to make sure they live a life that's more conducive, so we don't fall into this poor health spiral that we're starting to see in today's society that is really affecting a lot of factors, especially, in the quote unquote first world countries. So when we look at what habit is, it's defined as a routine or practice performed regularly. So an automatic response to a very specific situation. Now, the things about habits is that we don't even know that we're doing them. They are so routine, and we perform these behaviors regularly in most cases, that it's almost automatic. And although habits are to a large degree based on our environment, but understanding habit formation will allow you to become more aware of your habits and also help others do the same. Now, one of our first labs that we're going to be doing, and it will be released soon, is a behavioral change lab. And essentially what it's going to be is how we can use journaling to help us change a behavior. So one thing you're going to need to do for the lab is you have to identify a behavior that you feel you would like to change in order to improve your health. So part of this assignment or lab is sitting down and really reflecting on who you are and what you do individually. And you're going to try and pinpoint one specific habit, and you're going to try and change it by making small changes, and journal about that each and every day. So this lecture is an important part for that assignment in that lab. So when we look at behaviors, the behaviors are what ends up shaping us. And behaviors are developed from habits. And if we look at what the definition of a behavior is, it's the way in which each person acts in response to a particular situation or stimulus. So things like how our body moves is a reflection on our movement behaviors that we express daily. So we're doing the squat challenge right now as part of this class. And really, you can see essentially what your movement behavior is based on how you can squat or how long you can hold that squat for. So if you can squat no problem, you can hold that position for 60 seconds without any stiffness or pain, then you have good movement behaviors, and you obviously express those movement behaviors daily. Now, if we look at something like sleep, how rested we feel in the morning is a direct reflection of your sleep behaviors. How we view the world is a reflection of our thought behaviors. So one thing to point out with humans, too, is we are creatures of habit. I mean, that's one of the biggest things, and I've stressed this for the last 15 years that I've been teaching, is humans are creatures of habit. And our behavior habits are what shape us physically and mentally. Now, in order to change our health, we have to change our behaviors. So think about the physical part of it, right? If you go back to the squats, if you have a hard time squatting, well, there's a reason for that. All right, whether it is you don't move enough, you don't have a habit of moving enough, or getting into a squat position enough, all right, it affects it. Okay, mentally as well, though our thought patterns, right? That's based on the habits that we've created and the behaviors that have developed from them. So we can have detrimental physical and mental health-related problems if we have poor behaviors that lead to it. But on the opposite side of things, if we have good habits that have led to good behaviors, it's going to help our physical and mental health. And that's one thing we really need to think about too when we're talking about health and behavioral change, is we have to understand that a lot of people have good habits. And what we want to do is make sure that we continue to reinforce those good habits while trying to change the habits that, we want to be better at, right? So you can look at any single person, the quote unquote unhealthiest person in the world, and I guarantee you they probably have a few habits that are conducive to health, that are helping them in some way. They may have some habits that are decreasing their health in other ways, but instead of focusing just on those, understand what habits that you or they have that is going to really help them feel a little bit positive about themselves while they're trying to change these other massive habits. But again, we have to realize that change needs to happen in small incremental steps too with behavior and habits. It takes a long time to do it, and the best way to do is just tiny changes as we go. Now, behaviors are really reflected from the environment. That's a big, big part. So if we look at healthy behaviors ensue from an environment optimized for health. So if we consciously recognize that our habits are affecting us, and we look at our environment around us, that can help us recognize what's happening. And then we can take steps to change them. And that's the hardest task though, right? Because we have to understand that as soon as we figure out that this habit is affecting us, then we have to change it. And it's a hard task, okay? So when we're changing a habit, we have to realize it requires a strong commitment. We have to be mindful of our actions, right? We have to focus on the positives, not dwell on the negatives. There's a lot of really important aspects of behavioral change that we need to focus on. But the one thing you have to understand is it's hard work, especially if the behavior is reflected in the environment, because the environment is what's triggering the habits. So if we have an environment that is not conducive to healthy behaviors, it's going to trigger our habits, and that's going to make things really difficult. So for a lot of people, it's going to feel like a very daunting and difficult task. But what we have to make them realize is it's not impossible. It's never an impossible thing. Every single person can accomplish behavioral change if, one, they know how to do it, and two, they commit to it. All right? Those are really the first two steps in making behavioral change: understanding and committing. So when we understand or we know what habits are really triggering what's happening, and then understanding how our environment is creating them, that's going to lead to real self-realization of what's happening. So it does mean understanding our surroundings, right? Whether it's physical or social, and then how those surroundings affect our habits. Now, these can present, a great opportunity to help people understand how they can design the environment that promotes healthy habits. Most of us right now can probably pick out two things in our environment where we spend most of our time that is leading to poor habits, and probably can make a conscious effort at fixing that, and then trying to promote healthy habits within our environment. So a great example is junk food. All right, so you have this picture of a cupboard full of junk food, right? Well, if there's no junk food in the house, which is our environment, it's going to be really difficult to, keep your late night junk food snacking habit up. If you don't have access to the food, then you won't eat it. So it comes down to having the discipline and self-control to make sure you're not providing your environment with anything that is tempting. And if you can do that, then you're going to eliminate the temptation. And then that way, the temptation won't even be there if any type of thing comes about. So just a simple environment change like that, just not having junk food, right? If we look at a movement one, right? So you want to improve your movement. Well, put a yoga mat in the middle of your living room. Just leave it in the living room, or the room that you spend the most time in. And then that engineers your environment to see that yoga mat and say, oh, okay, I need to work on my mobility. I'm going to do that right now for 30 minutes while I'm listening to music. Right? So just by a simple change, by putting something that triggers your thought process positively, is going to help lead to a better lifestyle or a better environment conducive to lifestyle. So what we want to do is help people target the environment as they are also becoming more aware of their habits, and you will have made their job significantly easier. And then that increases their chance of success. And in order for new habits to form and behaviors to change, success is key. So the more you can do to help succeed will give them the confidence to keep going. Then this is going to prevent people from being the victim of their environment by empowering them to architect it and be the architect of their own environment. So just little tiny simple tips like that is going to make a huge difference. But again, it comes down to identifying and understanding what the problem is. So if many of the behaviors that people do on a daily basis are habits, then it makes sense that being able to coach behavioral change will require an understanding of habit formation. In the book, Atomic Habits by James Clear, he specifies habit formation into 4 stages: noticing, wanting, doing, and liking. So essentially what happens is we have this intentional habit formation, and it's all about creating systems. And it starts with small steps and planning out the path in detail about how you will create good habits while breaking old ones. The key to helping people create good health habits is help them systematize their goals with realistic steps and keep them accountable through a mindset of love, acceptance, and support. If we can do that, that will help them get 1% better each day. And that's what we want to accomplish. Small steps. The 1% better each day is a really good analogy. Now, I have a YouTube link that I'm going to put on the behavioral change discussion board. And it's a video of James Clear going through these 4 stages. All right, so you can watch that and see how he talks about noticing, wanting, doing, and liking, and making the 1% change each day, which is a real, as I said, it's a very important and powerful way of trying to improve yourself, because it might not seem like a lot. And again, it goes back down to process versus product. If you're focused on the product and you're trying to change habits, you're going to have a hard time changing the habits into new behaviors, because you're going to be expecting results constantly. And if you're going to be expecting results constantly, in the short term, you're not going to get them. And it's going to frustrate you or the person you're working with, and they're going to have a hard time with it. So by getting them to focus on the process, little steps each day, it's going to really compile into greater results in the long term. And that's what health change is making sure we have greater results in the long term. So what we want to try to do is really take control of our habits. If we can take control of our habits, we will take control of our life. That is really what lifetime habits are. Is just taking control of the habits that are affecting us negatively, turning them into positives, and take control of our life. So when it comes to health, it's all about creating habits that last a lifetime, right? That's the one thing with dieting, right? Dieting is one of the most complicated and difficult habits that people can change. And what usually happens is people end up going on these yo-yo diets, right? They go on a diet, they lose a bunch of weight, they feel great, and then they gain it back. And then they go on a diet, they lose weight, and they gain it all back. And they just fluctuate. Their weight fluctuates 20 pounds up and down, all right? Which is difficult because that actually puts a lot of stress on your body. Ideally, what you want to be able to do is fluctuate a very, very small amount of weight for a long period of time. You want to be in a healthy weight range and stay within that healthy weight range throughout your entire life. And you do that with lifetime habits of good eating. So the way our brains are wired is we tend to take the path of least resistance. And with health, this often materializes as diets or New Year's exercise resolution, or in some ways, pain medication. So in order to restore optimal health, every individual must constantly work on processes of achieving health, and a major element of this is developing lifetime habits. Now, the path to least resistance is such an important one to understand as individuals and humans. We always want to go down the road to least resistance, or the easiest road, and I see that a lot with diet too. When we were at school, when you're at school, there's a cafeteria, and what tends to happen is most of us, we don't bring our lunch, say, one day. And so we have to go to the cafeteria. And then we go in the cafeteria and we look at our options. Most cafeterias, they do have some healthier options, but most of them are unhealthy options. So what you do is you go there, you're smelling the different food, and what tends to happen is you're hungry immediately. You want to eat. You start smelling the nice food. It makes you hungrier. You don't want to wait. You just go to what's the easiest. So for some people, that's just going and getting a quick slice of pizza and a pop, right? And then that's your lunch. You don't have any vegetables or fruits in there. You're drinking sugar. You're eating pizza, which is I'm not saying anything's wrong with pizza, but it is a high calorie option. And if you're just having pizza and a pop, then that's not the best. But it's the path to least resistance, right? And so many of us do that when we're driving home or we're on the transit home. We get hungry. It's so easy just to stop at a fast food restaurant, get our food, and eat, right? So the path of least resistance is a huge part in the human psyche, and it really can negatively affect health. And it's the same thing with exercise. Knowing you need to exercise, but just not exercising is so much easier. So we need to break that habit as well as humans, is just making sure that we don't slide into this path of least resistance. Now, when it comes to these lifetime habits, a lot of you probably, as I said, already have a lot of lifetime habits, right? What's your morning routine like? You probably have your hygienic routine. You brush your teeth, have a shower. There's a healthy habit, all right? But we need to first we need to understand, we need to understand what are some of the habits that we need to change. So, for some people, they have a morning joint hygiene routine where they do mobility work in the morning to help get their joints moving, get the synovial fluid in their joints, and loosen up their muscles and their tendons and their ligaments, and they feel less stiff throughout the day, right? Some people have habits of disconnecting from technology and spending time in nature, right? Some people have a habitual system for purchasing food to ensure they always have fresh, real food available, right? So when it comes to developing these healthy habits that last for a lifetime, the thing we need to understand the most, it's a mindset. All right. And that's an important thing to understand, that it's a mindset. And if we can get into that mindset where we're going to make the habits and the change in habits, we're going to go and develop these new lifetime habits, then we're going to see real change in the long term. And that's the most important thing, process-based change. Real change in the long term. That's process-based. That's what's healthy. That's what's going to lead you down a path of good health and a longer life and a good quality of life. So when it comes to healthy behaviors, one thing you guys need to realize as potential professional health professionals is you affect more people around you than you might realize. Healthy behaviors are powerful, they're contagious, and they are far more influential than you might think. So just by being healthier yourself, you're actually, whether you realize it or not, people will observe your behavior from you telling them a story or from watching you, do something different or do something healthy or choose a different food. It's going to affect them. It's going to make them think about, oh, okay, this person is doing this and it seems to be making them happy. Maybe I should start doing something like that, right? So you might not think about it, but you're essentially leading people down a path, especially when you share what you're doing, right? So whether it be, your children, if you have children, or your friends, your family, even someone you see on the street or on the bus, your actions are going to speak to people whether you realize it or not. Okay, and that's a powerful thing. Just to know, right? So the way you move, act, stand, and behave can ripple through your social network. And it will affect not just your friends, but also your friends' friends, and so on. All the more important to be an example and lead others through your actions. So you might think, and some people might say, that taking care of yourself might be selfish, but really, it could end up being a selfless act in the end. So that's why I always tell people, make sure you put time aside to take care of yourself. It's okay to do things for yourself. It's okay to be selfish once in a while. And by doing that, you're going to help others, especially if you're doing something for yourself that is helping you, that is helping your health in the long term, right? So just making sure that you take care of yourself, and it's also great to share your experiences. It's one reason why I have the discussion board and I'm putting up these challenges, is if others see improvements or hear that you're making improvements, it could inspire others. And that's why, a lot of people say a lot of negative things about social media, and, social media is toxic or whatever. But you know what? If you share the right content in social media, it could be inspiring for others. You don't know, right? So that's why it's important to make sure, as I have this quote here, right? Leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders. And that's what you want to do in your health journey, is inspire others to start their own journey, and then that they will inspire others to start theirs. So not only are you creating habits of 1% each day, you're hopefully creating a domino of 1% of the population trying to become healthier, right? And if we can all do that, then the degrees of separation becomes huge, and it could inspire the entire country or entire continent, if it spirals down and affects more people. And that's really the mindset you should have as well. That mindset can help you become better, because you're not only doing this for yourself, but you might inspire somebody else. Now, the other thing that we need to understand is change is scary, especially for humans. Like I said, we are creatures of habit. So when it comes to changing our habits, it's hard. And there's two reasons why it's hard. First off, it's scary, right? Putting yourself out there, trying to think about being different, it's scary. Okay? It's why a lot of people fail in behavioral change. It's because it's too scary for them. And then the other thing is, most of what we do, we don't even realize why or when we do it. So the habit thing is just so habitual, we don't even know. That's why we need to first understand. So if we look at the human brain, it's actually wired with a fear response, especially when it comes to change. And that's actually because of an ancestral thing. It's ancestral, and what happens is we get these abrupt changes to how we live, and sometimes it's not often a good thing. So we have the most, our most powerful tool is to fight the fear of change. Start with small steps. All right? And when I say small steps, I mean small. Because the smaller steps we have, we can disarm that fear response and we can start removing the barriers that are always in our way. And what I mean by why it's ancestral is if you think about hunter-gatherers, or you think about hunter-gatherers, they would have always had to essentially fight to live and have to constantly move. They always had to go to different places, right? They never had the comfort that we have now of knowing where our food comes, knowing where our the security of housing. They never knew that. All right? So they had constant abrupt change. And we've evolved with that fear response. So if we can go against our natural fight to resist change through small steps, we will disarm that fear response much faster than if we just try and, kick things cold turkey and just, I'm stopping this now and I'm done and that's it, right? Small changes. So I believe as kinesiology students and future health educators, health professionals, it's our role to help people remove the barriers to change. So often that will mean understanding their situation and suggesting tiny steps that can be taken without intimidation in order to kickstart their journey of health. Think about the mobility work we're doing and I'm sending you each Monday. It's tiny steps that I'm trying to give you for a greater picture, right? Do these tiny little movements a couple times a week and see how it can affect and how it can improve. Now, I'm not sure if you know who John Wooden is. He's a basketball coach. He coached at UCLA. He was responsible for developing one of the greatest athletic programs of all time. Right? They won national championship after national championship. He's one of the greatest coaches. He's a legend. He has this great quote. When you improve a little each day, eventually big things occur. Don't look for the big, quick improvement. Seek the small improvement one day at a time. That's the only way it happens. And when it happens, it lasts. I think this quote is one of the greatest quotes there is, especially for behavioral change. And it really, really exemplifies the small change aspect. All right. Now, he was a coach, as I said, of one of the greatest programs. Okay. If you're not sure about John Wooden, look him up. Look at the UCLA Bruins basketball team from the 60s, 70s, and the amount of national championships they won. Each practice they went in, and his goal was to have a tiny improvement each day. And he did that throughout the entire season. And by the time they got into playoffs, his team was ready, they were good, and it lasted. So we can take that principle and we can put it into our everyday life. So it's the power of small habits, the power of small changes. So it makes intuitive sense to think that massive improvements in health require drastic changes in behavior. And this makes health intimidating to many, especially when they realize the long road ahead. So many feel that slight improvements will only result in negligible change. But what they fail to realize is the compounding effects of consistency. And that's what we want to make sure we stress. So if we just do some simple arithmetic from James Clear, if we improve by 1% each day for 1 year, we will end up 30 times better after 365 days. That is a 3,700% improvement. What starts small accumulates into something much more, and it holds the power of small changes. Now, fast forward that 2, 5, 10 years from now. What's the value of good habits then? I think it becomes very apparent. So if we look at that theory alone, it just shows you how a tiny, tiny change can make a huge difference. I already talked about the milk example, switching from 2% to skim milk, and how that's 10 pounds of calories a year if you were drinking 1 cup of milk a day. 10 pounds just by making a small change and compounding it over a year. A lot of it's like that. Another great example I use for myself is one thing I make a conscious effort to do, and it's a small change, is walk my kids to school. It's a 15-minute walk there. It's a 20-minute walk home. And the reason why it's less there compared to home is because I live on a mountain, and so it's downhill to school. It's uphill back. So it's a little bit different. So if I walk my kids to school every day and I pick them up every day, that's 5 days a week, twice a day, of 35 minutes each time. That turns into 70 minutes of walking. I've done the heart rate calorie conversion. So when I walk my kids to school, just at a not even walking hard. I do have the hill. It changes things a little bit, but each day it adds 100 calories burnt. That 70 minutes of light intensity walking might not seem like a lot to most people. It's only 100 calories a day. If I do that every day for 5 days, that's 500 calories. Okay? Still might not seem like a lot, right? It's only 500 calories. Well, if I do that for 4 weeks, that's 2,000 calories. Again, might not seem like a lot. But if we compile that and we look at how many calories it takes to burn a pound of fat, which is 3,500 calories, right there after 10 months of the school year, I'm looking at 5 pounds of fat lost just by walking the kids to school. Small change, compounded, big result, right? So it might seem silly, but it's the truth. If you're going to succeed or help others succeed with behavioral change, the small changes are going to end up with the most successful results. And that's what you should stress with people. Now, when it comes to the psychology of habits, if we think about it, habit formation, it's a fairly simple concept. Behaviors followed by satisfying consequences are repeated, and those produce unpleasant consequences that are less likely to be repeated. A habit is a behavior that is repeated so many times that it becomes automatic, which in turn allows your brain to use its mental resources for other tasks. Habits are an efficient mechanism used to reduce the cognitive load on our brains by removing the need to solve the same problem repeatedly. So there's a behavioral scientist named Jason Hirita. He said it well. Habits are simply reliable solutions to reoccurring problems in our environment. So habit formation is extremely useful when it comes to efficiency, but when unhealthy habits are formed based on conveniences and dangers of modern society, they can cause us massive problems, especially when we aren't aware of them. And most habits, that's just it. We're unaware of them. So when it comes to the psychology of habit, there's these 3 R's of habit formation. 1 is reminder, 2 is routine, 3 is reward. So if we want to psychologically develop a habit, we need reminders, we need to make it routine, and there has to be a reward at the end of it. For most people, the reward is several different things. All right, let's look at running, for example, making running a habit. Okay, now I've said this before, not everyone likes running, and if you don't like running, you don't need to incorporate it into your daily habitual behaviors. If you want to make, let's just say you want to make running a habit, all right? First thing you need to do is figure out how you're going to give yourself reminders to run. I've mentioned laying out your clothes, your running clothes on your bed the night before. So they're there, you see them. There's the reminder. Then it has to become a routine. All right. So the routine can be obviously doing it Monday, Wednesday, Friday. All right. So you're going to commit to running Monday, Wednesday, Friday every week, and that's going to be your routine. Then once you start doing it, you'll get a reward. Okay. If you want to make it some sort of external reward where you get yourself a cup of coffee or something that you like, then that's fine. But a lot of the times you get these intrinsic rewards, right? So one of them, better health. When we run, there's something called the runner's high. When you run and exercise, you get these endorphins released and you feel good. All right, so there's a lot of intrinsic rewards that actually happen when we set habits. All right, so we have to understand that there's psychology to it as well. And the more we look into the psychology of habit formation, the easier it will be. Now, there is a little bit of science behind habits, and James Clear in his book writes the process of building a habit and how it can be broken down into 4 simple steps. It's very similar to what I just went over, the psychology of health. Cue, craving, response, reward. All right, so when we look at the cue, that is what triggers our brain to initiate behavior. It's a piece of information that we receive which predicts a potential reward. Ancestrally, cues might have been something from the environment that hinted the presence of a suitable mate, food or water. In today's world, advertisers have actually mastered the art of using cues to initiate behaviors. So for example, if you see a billboard with a hamburger on it or you smell a donut, it can cue you to seek out that food. Cues lead to the next step of habit formation, which is craving. The craving is what generates the motivation behind habits and creates the desire to act. What few understand is that the craving is not for the habit itself, but for the change in state that the habit creates. We don't crave eating a donut. We don't crave the feeling of consuming something delicious. We don't crave smoking a cigarette. You crave the feeling that smoking a cigarette gives you, or the feeling that a donut gives you. The cravings that a cue generates depend on the past experiences of the person in question. This means that different people can react very differently to the same cue. The third step is habit formation. Habit formation is a response, which is the actual habit is that we're performing in order to achieve the last elements, the reward. So rewards are the end goals of habits. So the cue is about noticing the reward, the craving is about wanting the reward, and the response is about obtaining the reward. All behavior driven by the desire to solve problems. Sometimes the problem is that you see something delicious and you want it, or sometimes the problem is that you're experiencing pain and you want to relieve it. Understanding that the problem that a habit is solving can be extremely helpful in changing the habit. So understanding the science of how habits are formed gives you the awareness needed to successfully create new habits. The 4 laws of behavioral change are based off the 4 stages of habit formation and provide a framework for hacking habits, building healthy habits, and breaking unhealthy ones. So here are the 4 laws applied to creating habit. Law 1, the cue, make it obvious. Law 2, the craving, make it attractive. Law 3, the response, make it easy. Law 4, reward, make it satisfying. Then when it comes to breaking bad habits, inverting the 4 laws provide a framework for breaking the bad habits as well. So inversion of law 1, cue, make it invisible. Inversion of law 2, make it unattractive. Inversion of law 3, make it difficult. Inversion of law 4, make it unsatisfying. Understanding the laws of habit formation arms you with the tools needed to engineer systems into your environment to promote success in building and breaking habits. The goal is to constantly engage in the process of understanding why you act the way you do to create an environment where good habits emerge naturally and bad habits wither away with little. Now, when it comes to changing habits, goals are important. They guide us in the direction we want to go and provide the motivation. But without the systems to implement goals, it can be hard to reach them. If you take Olympians, for example, every single one of them has a goal of winning a gold medal. But the difference between the people who actually win a medal and those who don't often boils down to the plan that was created to ensure the goal was met. Systems provide a framework so you can remove the guesswork of what needs to be done and when. Systems also improve the chances of success by planning for difficulties that may arise and developing strategies to avoid or deal with the obstacles. If you have a goal of not snacking on potato chips in the evening, a simple system to use in order to achieve that goal is to make sure that potato chips aren't visible or readily available in your home. Not even having the temptation present is much more effective system than trying to rely on self-control or discipline, which often fail at some point. So our role as health educators, health professionals, is to help others rediscover health and understand their goals and work together to create realistic systems that ensure those goals are met. So we start with small goals and simply lifestyle change. Anyone can change simple lifestyle factors and achieve significant improvements in their health. All they need is a bit of planning, a little bit of creating systems to reach their goals. So goals are an important thing. We have to make sure we maintain goals, even with habit formation. So the more goals we set, the more realistic goals we set, right? The simple goals we set, the more successful we'll be, and the more change we'll achieve. Then the final thing we want to look at in changing habits is accountability. So achieving goals and implementing change in your life can be especially difficult without help from others. As humans, we are social animals. And in times of hardship, we have always depended on people around us to help. Accountability is just that. Keeping someone accountable doesn't mean shaming them when they fail to meet a goal. It doesn't mean simply reminding them to do something. It means joining forces with them to problem solve and create the systems in place for success. Whether it's telling someone in your close social network about a goal you are working towards, a weekly chat in to receive support, encouragement and share progress with others, or arrange for someone to help you avoid cues or remember behaviors. Accountability can provide a massive benefit to people when they're creating and breaking habits. So this lecture here is just really the most simplistic way I felt I can help you understand behavior change. And I'm going to release the first lab, which is the Behavioral Change Journal. And the first thing you need to do with that journal is identify a behavior you want to change. So I'm going to release that lab in a couple days. But the first thing you need to do before you start that lab is identify something. Identify a behavior you want to change. So some sort of habit or some sort of behavior that you think has unhealthy properties. Something that may compound to something far worse than what's happening now. Whether it's movement, whether it's eating, whether it's sleeping, whatever it is, figure out a habit that has led to a behavior that is not conducive to health and write it out. And then when we get into the behavioral journal, you'll already have that point done. All right? And that's really the key. It's the key to behavioral change, right? Understanding what behavior needs to change. So do that, and then we'll release that lab, and then we can start doing some of the journaling. All right? Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you listening, and we will talk very soon.